Quickly to just go over some ways that you might improve the way that something prints, as I showed you in class. One of the things you can do is turn the background to white and get rid of the grid, and then you can do a screen capture or a print without the background. It's under File, Properties. On the Mac side, it's under Rhinoceros, and then Properties. And then you're looking for colors under Rhino Options, Appearance, Colors. And let's set the background color to white. Okay. And then at least in the perspective view, which is the view that you most likely will create your prints from, let's turn off the grid. So I'm just going to type the command grid, and where it says show grid, click that so it toggles to no. And show grid axes, also click that and toggle to no. If you wanted to apply this to all of the viewports, you could check here. I'm just going to leave it so it's only on the perspective viewport and hit enter. So now if I maximize the perspective viewport, if I modeled something in this viewport, then when I went to print, I wouldn't have all of the gray of the background and the grid. Under your view menu, you have a couple of options. Technical might be a good option. When you go to output, it will look very similar to your hand drafted view. You can also access those options by right mouse clicking on the title of the viewport. And here are the different ways that you can view. I really like ghosted when I'm working on the model. It's a really great way to see things that are on top of each other or nested. So if I were going to print this, at this point on the Mac, the keyboard is Control, Command, and the 4 key to print a window. On the PC, I think you just hit the print screen button on your keyboard, if you have one of those, and that'll capture what you see on the screen, and then you can open it in Photoshop and resize it and make the image so that you can print it on 8.5 by 11 paper. I think one of the easiest ways to model the voids in your book is that you should actually model all of the open space as solids, and then we'll subtract those. We'll basically use those solids to create holes in the pages. So I know you guys have all different types of geometries that you're working with, but one thing that's pretty common is that you have these geometries that kind of step down in size, or they step incrementally rotate or something like that. And so just to show you, I would build those up as layers of geometry. So let's say that we have something that looks kind of like a pyramid shape hole in your book that's made up of layers of pages. So we can just start with our old box tool to make something like that. So I'm going to pick a point, and let's say that the largest of the boxes is 2 inches. So I'm going to type 2 inches by 1 inch, and that it's made up of a thin stack of pages that's about 1/16 of an inch tall. Okay, so that's my first layer in the pyramid, and then we're going to work up and we're going to scale the pyramid down. So I would just work by copying this layer, so the copy. Make sure to turn your O snaps on. So here's down here or up at the top on the Mac version, turn your O snaps on and turn endpoint on, and let's just copy it right above. So now I have 2 layers stacked on top of each other. I need one construction line to help me with this next step, so I'm just going to use my line tool, and let's go ahead and draw the construction line from the midpoint, and then I'll just bring it out here. Enter to finish that command, and I'd like to copy that 1/16 of an inch. I know that this pyramid, the second layer in the level, is offset 1/16 of an inch from the layer below. So now I'm going to use the scale 2D command. And the reason I'm using scale 2D as opposed to scale, just simple scale, is that I don't want to scale the vertical dimension. I would like that to retain the 1/16 inch dimension. So I really just want to scale the X and the Y, but not the Z. So scale 2D, select objects to scale, origin point, and here if you turn on your midpoint snap, I want to scale from the center of the object. So turn on your midpoint snap and then hover your mouse over the midpoint of one of the edges, and then hover your mouse over the midpoint of a perpendicular edge. And now if you just drag your mouse out to the center, it'll automatically find the intersection of those 2 points and click. And so now I've set the midpoint of this plane as my center point for my scaling. For my first reference point, go ahead and select the midpoint of the outer edge and then the end point of the construction line, and now we've just set that back on 2 sides. I want to do it again. Copy. From there to there. I would like to keep these construction lines, so I'm going to move those construction lines. Whoops, not move face, just move. Move these 2 construction lines from the end point to the midpoint of the new layer that I just created. And then I'll do it again. Scale 2D. Select that top layer, hover over the midpoint, drag my mouse until I find the intersection, click, and then I set the reference point, the reference length. I'm setting the original length with my first click and the new length with my second click. So I want to click on the existing edge of that layer and then come back to the end of my construction line, and there we have it. I'll do it one more time. Let me take my construction lines. I want to move them, not copy them. Okay, so let's say that's how that looks. Another variation that I've seen many times is similar, but maybe only 1 or 2 of your edges are scaled back or are shifting. So another thing you can do is you can move individual faces. So let's go ahead and start the same way. Start by creating your layer, your largest layer, and then let's copy another layer above, and this time we'll use the move face command. So I want to select the face that I'd like to move, just one at a time, or at least in one direction at a time. And let's say I'd like to move that back by 1/16 of an inch, so I type in 1/16 and then I click to set the direction. Let me do it again. Move face, select the face that I want to move, set my origin point, type in my distance, and click. If you ever get this menu, just simply scroll through the menu until the face that you are desiring to click is highlighted, and click, and there you go, you've selected it. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can make those transformed surfaces. Let me scooch this over and give us a little bit of room. Another type of geometry that is pretty common that you guys are working with are slightly rotated systems. So again, if we just start by creating the base layer, copy that layer, and then you can use the rotate command. Let's say we want to rotate from this back corner. My angle or first reference point is here. And if you wanted to, you could give yourself a construction line so that you set exactly what the length is, what the distance is along that curve. And click. And then you can keep doing the same thing. Once you've set your rotation distance one time, you should be able to keep using that same rotation distance over and over again. So let me show you. If I copy this plane again, and I want to rotate it the same amount that I rotated the lower plane, type rotate, select the upper plane, but this time when I set my base point, I want to set my base point so that it's the lower edge of the plane below, so here. And now I would like to set my rotation, my reference point from this original corner, and then click on the new corner, and now I've just set that same angle. I'll do that one more time. Copy, rotate. My center of rotation is down below. This is the original angle, that's the new angle, and now I've just translated that angle again. If your thing rotates and changes scale, go ahead and just do the same thing. Rotate first and then scale 2D, but you can set your origin point to be at that corner, and then each of these can be scaled to become smaller. So that's a few ways that you can make those incremental changes when you're working on either the single page layer or a small group of pages. You may notice that I made all of these just flat on my C-plane, but perhaps in your book they actually are upside down from this or at a different angle or rotation. So the command to get these guys into the right position could be rotate 3D. And what rotate 3D does is that instead of the rotate that we used here, where things stay planar on your C-plane, rotate 3D actually allows you to rotate by a specified axis. So let's go ahead and select all of these objects and rotate 3D. Enter when I'm done. And what I want to do is I want to flip these over so that they're upside down, and then I'm going to subtract them out of my pages. Start of rotation axes right here along the bottom. My angle or first reference point, make sure you have your orthographic mode turned on for this. So I'm just going to go, you'll see as I move my mouse, now I'm at 90 degrees to that axis, my rotation axis, and now I'm 180 degrees, so I just flipped them right upside down. I'd like to recenter my point of view on these objects, so I'm going to select those objects and hit the button that looks like a magnifying glass with a little peanut inside of it. That maximizes those things to fit my window, but it also resets the center point of my 3D rotation at the center point of those objects. Okay, so what I'd like to do is for each of these sets, I'm going to combine them together into one object. So I'm just going to use boolean union. It should work in a pretty straightforward way. So each one at a time, boolean union. So now I've combined those together into single objects. Okay, let me go ahead and create a larger box, which would be representative of the pages of the book, the pages before you carved them. So that could be my pages, and I need to move these other pieces into the right location. So let me go ahead and select each of these and type move. And I would like to get this let me bring it first up to the corner so that I know that it's at the right height, and then I can move it incrementally, right? I can move it if I know that it's 1 inch in from that corner. I can set that, and if I know that they're 1/8 of an inch in from the other corner, there. Okay, so I think I've positioned them correctly. And then let's try this. Let's try boolean. Boolean difference. So that's what I want to do. I want to subtract one object from another object. So polysurfaces to subtract from should be my pages. And subtract with should be these sets that I made. And it looks like that worked. So I've just created those voids in my book. I'll try turning my ISO curves off to see if that makes it a little more clear. Okay, let me show you one more thing. I know that many of you have folded pages that are single pages that are folded out and layered and start to create some really interesting forms. So let me show you at least one technique for how you might create those folded pages. So let's say off of this rectangle that I folded my pages and I folded them over in this direction and I cut them so I had a triangular shaped piece of paper over on this side. And since I know that I cut it out of this, I know that it would fit in there, so I'm just going to use the geometry that's already here to draw a closed polyline that's the right size, and then I'm going to rotate 3D to flip it over to the other side. So rotate 3D. My rotation axis is this edge. My first point I want here, and I'm going to flip it over 180 degrees. So now I have that curve sticking out the other side. I actually have a little mistake here, but I'm sure that you guys probably will run into these kind of things. So let me show you one way to fix this. What happened is that when I was drawing my curves, I accidentally snapped to a point that was not in the same plane. And then I have this point over here, and I don't know what plane those things are in. So what I'm going to do is project to C plane. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that curve and flatten it down on the ground, and then I can move it back into position. So select objects to project, delete input objects, yes. Okay, so that my same curve, but it was moved down to the ground where it was flattened, and so I should be able to now move it back up here, and it looks like it fits perfectly, but now it's all horizontal. My points are all on the same plane. And then what I want to do is convert that curve into a surface. So underneath your little surface menu here, the second item over surface from planar curves, go ahead and select that, and select your curve and hit enter. And then just to keep things clean, you'll notice that now I have a curve, and I think I have two surfaces because I pushed enter. I only want one surface. So let me select the curve and hit delete or type delete. So now I just have the one surface. So let's say we have these pages folding out, the next one folds out, the next one folds out, and they start to sort of splay out a little bit. So what I want to do, similar technique, is let's go ahead and copy the surface that I've already created. So we want to copy it right on top of the other one. So there are now two surfaces there. And I'll select one of them. Let's turn our control points on. And let's take this outer point and go ahead and move it. So let's go ahead and move this outer point. You should know what the dimension is. Let's say that it's 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so now they're still right on top of each other, which may or may not be the correct way. On a lot of your books, what starts to happen is that these tend to fan. So let's move one more time. This time vertical, we want to check yes. On the Windows version, you can just type V for vertical. And I'm going to take these two outside control points and move them vertically and whatever the dimension is, let's say it's 1/16 of an inch. So now I have those two sheets of paper that are starting to fan out, and I can do the same thing over and over again. You should notice that you can't really select on the object that has the control points turned on, so before I move on, I would need to turn my control points off by hitting the escape key. So let me do the same thing. I'm going to copy right on top of each other. Then I want to select one of those surfaces. I want to turn my control points on. First, just move this corner. I did it by 1/8 of an inch. And then I want to move both of these. I hold the Shift key to select both of them at the same time. Move both of them vertically 1/16. So now I'm starting to simulate what those folded pages look like as they start to splay out.